April 1945. The air inside the POW camp in France smelled of damp canvas and boiled coffee. Behind barbed wire, a dozen German women stood in faded field, grey uniforms, nurses, clerks, auxiliaries, watching the Americans on the other side unwrap something bright, curved, and impossibly yellow. The colour didn't belong here, not in this world of mud, smoke, and rations. One soldier laughed, peeled the strange fruit with his thumb, and bit in. The women frowned, whispering, "Was ist das?" Someone asked, another guessed, maybe soap. A nurse named Irmgard leaned closer, trying to read the Americans' expressions. They weren't grim or mocking. They were relaxed, a different species of calm. Then one of the soldiers noticed the staring. Grinning, he walked over, holding one of the yellow things like a peace offering. The guard hesitated, then shrugged. The fence gate opened for a brief exchange. Irmgard reached out, hand trembling, and accepted it. The skin felt waxy, smooth, unreal. It was the first banana she had ever seen. In Nazi Germany, bananas had vanished from markets by 1939. Imports stopped when war began. Tropical fruit was considered frivolous under blockade. Millions of civilians born after 1930 had never even tasted one. To these women, raised on propaganda of Allied decadence, this fruit was living proof that the enemy's world ran on abundance. Irmgard sniffed it. Sweet. She looked at the others. They nodded, urging her on. She peeled the top hesitantly. The crowd fell silent. The first bite brought laughter, a shock of sweetness, a moment of disbelief that something so soft, so harmless, could exist after years of iron, mud, and hunger. Behind her, another woman whispered, "They eat like kings even in war." For a fleeting second, the wire fence didn't matter. Hunger, pride, politics, all dissolved in the simple taste of something her country had forgotten existed. The American guard chuckled, then tossed another banana toward the women. They tore it apart, sharing the yellow pieces like stolen sunlight. But as Irmgard chewed, she saw an officer in khaki watching from the command hut, noting their reactions. Tomorrow morning he'd summon the camp guards. Something about this banana scene had reached command. Morning came with the clang of mess tins and the low hum of diesel trucks. But in Barrack 7, conversation wasn't about breakfast. It was about the yellow fruit from yesterday. Irmgard sat on a bunk, replaying the taste in her mind. Sweetness wasn't something war allowed. It had been 5 years of tin meat, ersatz coffee, and thin bread. Yet that bite, that strange tropical softness, felt like a message from another planet. When the American guard passed by, a few of the women tried broken English. "Banana," one said, mimicking the peeling motion. He grinned and held up another. The women gasped. This time 5 shared one banana, breaking it carefully like communion bread. Irmgard held her piece like glass before tasting it again. Laughter burst out, pure, surprised, almost childlike. A POW nurse named Elsa murmured, "It's like summer in your mouth." Bananas had been a legend in Germany since pre-war days. Before 1939, they arrived through Hamburg docks from Ecuador and Cameroon, 30 zeros, 0 tons a year. But after the blockade, posters appeared, "Fighters don't need bananas." The Reich replaced them with beet syrup and slogans. By 1945, most civilians thought the fruit had gone extinct. And here, in captivity, it returned bright proof that the enemy had kept living while they'd been starving. The women passed the peel around, touching its strange skin, inhaling its scent. One said, "It smells like warmth." Another whispered, "Maybe they feed this to children every day." The realization hurt more than hunger. For the Americans, it was a trivial act, a snack. For the POW, it was cognitive dissonance carved in yellow. How could the enemy have enough to hand fruit to prisoners while their own civilians fought over potato skins back home? When the sergeant made his morning report, he mentioned the reaction. They went crazy over the bananas. The camp commander frowned but didn't scold. "Interesting," he said. "Let's keep morale steady. Maybe show them how we feed our troops." Outside, Irmgard finished her bite and stared at the peel in her hand, a relic from a different reality. Around her, laughter faded into quiet awe. Somewhere in the distance, the camp loudspeaker crackled to life, calling guards to assembly. Whatever happened next had started with a banana. The bugle sounded before dawn, a long, metallic cry that sliced through the mist. Irmgard blinked awake on her bunk, the wooden boards creaking beneath her thin blanket. The air smelled of damp wool, soap, and something alien, fresh, brewed coffee. Outside, boots crunched on gravel as the guards called roll. Every morning followed the same rhythm. Line up, count off, march to breakfast, but for the German women, each day inside the American camp chipped away at everything they'd been told about enemy cruelty. The mess hall was plain, tin trays, wooden tables, but the food was undeniable. Oatmeal with sugar, bread still warm, even a slice of orange once a week. Reports show that by 1945, U.S. POW camps provided prisoners roughly 0 calories a day following Geneva Convention standards. For Irmgard, that was nearly double what she'd eaten as a nurse in Berlin. The Americans didn't gloat. They simply ran things efficiently, clean water, proper sanitation, and even scheduled recreation hours. Still, the women couldn't shake the strangeness. They'd been trained to see America as chaotic and greedy, yet here, order ruled. Guards were young, polite, occasionally joking in bad German. Rules are rules, one would say, but with a grin instead of a threat. When a transport truck rumbled past carrying crates of fruit, whispers rippled through the camp again. Bananas, that word had become a legend now, a symbol of this absurd captivity where prisoners ate better than their own soldiers. One POW whispered, "They're not afraid of us." Another replied, "They don't need to be." The paradox gnawed at them. The victors had more mercy than the Reich had discipline. Some of the women began sketching what they saw at the fences, the trucks, even the fruit, as if to prove to themselves that it was real. By noon, the sun burned through the fog and Irmgard stood near the fence, watching soldiers carry steaming trays. For the first time she noticed how relaxed their faces looked. No fear, no ration anxiety, just work, food, and laughter. And then she heard it, a murmur spreading through the yard. Someone said the commander was preparing a special orientation. Films, photographs, maybe even music. The rumor spread like static. Irmgard didn't know it yet, but the banana story was about to become something bigger, something the Americans wanted them to understand. By the third day, the banana had become legend. Irmgard overheard whispers at the water pump, rumors spreading like campfire smoke. They say the Americans have whole ships full of that fruit. From islands near Africa. No, from the jungles. No one knew the truth, but everyone felt the same strange awe. The enemy didn't just fight differently, they lived differently. After lunch, 2 guards unloaded a crate near the supply hut. The faint smell of ripened fruit drifted through the wire. A young POW nurse offered her only cigarette to a guard, gesturing hopefully. He laughed, hesitated, then passed her 1 banana through the fence. The women gathered close, hands trembling like they were handling gold. Bananas had once been a luxury even in peace. But by 1945, reports show the United States was importing nearly 20 million bananas every month from Latin America, Ecuador, Honduras, Puerto Rico. Despite the war, supply chains still moved like veins of steel and steam across oceans. For the German prisoners, this was unthinkable. Elsa bit first, smiling with closed eyes. It warmed like sunlight. She murmured. A few women giggled. Others fell quiet. They didn't just taste fruit, they tasted the scale of defeat. Think of it, Irmgard said softly. We rationed potatoes by the gram, they import sweetness by the ton. The guard watching them chewed gum and shrugged. Plenty more where that came from, he said, not in arrogance, but as if it were obvious. That casual abundance cut deeper than any insult. By evening, the rumor had grown wings. Some claimed Americans ate bananas with every meal. Others said it was war food, special fuel for soldiers. Someone even suggested it was fake, made of chemicals. The absurdity only made it more fascinating. In the barracks, Irmgard sketched a banana on a scrap of paper, labeling it proof of another world. The women laughed, but no one threw it away. Next morning, guards posted a notice. All POW personnel will attend an information session at 1,500 hours. A film screening, it said. No explanation. Irmgard folded the drawing into her pocket. If the Americans wanted to show them something, maybe it was time to see how this tropical fruit really reached the front lines of war. The camp mess hall had been cleared out and turned into a makeshift theatre. Rows of benches faced a white bed, sheet pinned to the far wall. A projector clicked and hummed, throwing circles of dust into the sunlight. The POW women filed in under guard, still uncertain. Irmgard clutched her folded banana sketch like a secret talisman. Then the first image flickered to life, not of soldiers, but of palm trees bending in ocean wind. The audience gasped. The film rolled on. Men in straw hats loading boxes onto a freighter, laughing, sweating. Labels stenciled bold on the crates. Chiquita, United Fruit Company. The American sergeant stood at the side, arms crossed. Food for the troops, he said matter of fact. Bananas swung from cranes into the belly of a massive steel ship. Beneath the images, English narration droned Liberty ships, built by American workers to feed, fuel, and fight. A chart flashed on screen, 700 Liberty ships launched by 1945, each capable of carrying 10,000 tons of cargo. Irmgard's mind reeled. In Berlin, they'd been melting church bells for scrap metal. Here, the enemy built fleets just to move fruit. Elsa whispered, "We can't even move bread without horses." The next reel showed factory lines, endless conveyor belts, workers smiling, mountains of crates marked food for Europe. Bananas, coffee, flour. The room fell silent. The women exchanged glances, half disbelief, half humiliation. Irmgard felt her throat tighten. Everything she'd been taught, that America was weak, decadent, dying under capitalism, cracked open under the weight of this footage. She stared at the glowing screen as tropical light washed over faces that hadn't seen sunlight in months. At the back, an American officer watched their reactions carefully. This wasn't entertainment. It was education, psychological warfare by film reel. Yet it didn't feel cruel, it felt revealing. As the final frame froze, a ship disappearing into horizon mist, the lights came on. The women blinked dazed. The sergeant said quietly, "Now you know where your bananas come from." Irmgard lowered her eyes. She wasn't sure if he meant it kindly or not. But one thing was clear. This war had been fought on two fronts, one with bullets, and one with logistics. That night she couldn't sleep. The images replayed in her mind, endless ships, endless fruit, and something deep inside began to fracture. That night, Irmgard lay awake staring at the barrack ceiling. The projector's light still burned in her mind, the ships, the workers, the laughing dockhands under palm trees. It was too vivid, too ordinary, too real. For years she'd believed what the Reich had drilled into them, that America was chaos, greed, and decay. But those reels showed something terrifyingly simple: competence, abundance. She thought of Berlin in 1945. The rubble, the air raid sirens, the queues for bread. Her last patient before capture had died from malnutrition, a 19-year-old soldier starved to bone. He'd fought believing the Allies were starving too. Now she'd seen the truth. While Germans scraped for crumbs, the Americans shipped bananas by the ton across oceans. Reports from the time show German civilians surviving on as little as 100-200 calories per day during the final war months, mostly turnips, ersatz bread, and watery soup. By contrast, American POW rations averaged nearly triple that. The numbers didn't lie. Propaganda had. Elsa whispered from the bunk above, "Do you think maybe we were wrong?" Irmgard didn't answer. She wanted to. But admitting it felt like betrayal, not of Germany, but of the idea that all the suffering had meant something. In the corner, one of the women began softly humming an old lullaby. The sound cut through the silence, fragile but human. Irmgard turned on her side and pulled out her small notebook. She started writing, not a diary, but questions. Why were we told they were monsters? Why do they feed us better than our own army did? What else did we not know? She wrote until the candle died. The next morning, she joined the breakfast line in silence. Every clang of a ladle, every spoonful of oats felt like evidence against the world she'd trusted. She caught herself glancing at the American cooks, noticing how casually they joked, how one of them offered her an extra spoon of sugar without hesitation. "You look tired," he said. Tired. That word hit harder than kindness. Irmgard went back to her bunk after roll call and hid the notebook under her pillow. She wasn't ready to share it yet, but the questions inside it would soon find their way onto paper meant for someone else, someone far away, still living inside the walls of propaganda. By late May, Irmgard couldn't keep it inside any longer. The questions in her notebook had multiplied like vines, growing through her sleep, her chores, her meals. One afternoon, she sat at a small wooden table in the camp's designated male tent. The guard handed her a single sheet of paper and a stub of pencil. "One page," he said. "No politics." She nodded. But what she wrote wasn't politics. It was confession. "Dear Mother, I am safe. The Americans treat us well, far better than we expected. The food is strange but good. Yesterday I tasted something called a banana. I can hardly describe it. Sweet, soft, yellow like sunshine. You peel it before eating. It sounds foolish, I know, but I felt like a child again. It reminded me that the world still grows things that aren't grey." She hesitated, glancing toward the guard near the tent flap. Censorship was strict. Over 90% of POW letters were read or edited by Allied intelligence. But she wanted her mother to understand something deeper, that the war stories they'd believed might have been wrong. On the back of the paper, Irmgard quickly sketched a small banana, curved and simple, with a note. "I tasted peace, and it was yellow." As she folded the letter, Elsa leaned over. "You're writing home." Irmgard smiled faintly, trying to. "Tell them we are alive." Elsa said, "But don't tell them too much. They won't believe you." That sentence lingered. 2 days later, the camp mail clerk noticed something odd. The small drawing slipped between the folds. Regulations forbade any symbols or coded messages. He set it aside for review. When Irmgard's name was called to report to the command hut, her stomach dropped. She expected punishment, extra duty, maybe solitary. But when she stepped inside, the American sergeant from the film screening stood waiting. He wasn't angry, just curious. "You wrote about bananas?" he asked, holding the letter like something fragile. Irmgard swallowed hard. "It's the first sweet thing I've tasted in years." The sergeant didn't reply immediately. Instead, he looked at her, really looked, and then said softly, "Come back tomorrow. I want to show you something." She left the hut confused, clutching her cap. Tomorrow, whatever that meant, it didn't sound like punishment. The next afternoon, Irmgard stood outside the command hut, her boots sinking into damp earth. A light drizzle hung in the air, and somewhere beyond the fence a radio played swing music, lazy, cheerful, almost mocking. She half expected interrogation. Instead, the same American sergeant stepped out, holding something behind his back. He was tall, his uniform neatly pressed, eyes neither cold nor soft. "Walk with me," he said. His tone wasn't command, it was invitation. They walked past the supply shed, toward a line of crates stamped San Juan P. R. He stopped beside one, pried it open, and pulled out a bunch of bananas, still greenish at the tips. "I figured you should have a second one," he said. "No cameras this time." Irmgard froze, unsure how to respond. He held one out to her. "My mother grows these," he added. "Puerto Rico, ever heard of it?" She shook her head. He smiled faintly, didn't think so. "It's an island, part of America, warm all year. You could plant these and they'd never stop growing." That word island hit her strangely. Germany had built walls, front lines, blockades. The Americans built bridges across oceans. Reports estimate that over 65,000 Puerto Ricans served in WWII, many in U.S. logistics and engineering units. Irmgard realized the man standing before her wasn't just a soldier. He was part of a machine so vast it could feed and clothe armies with help from people she'd never known existed. She peeled the banana, slower this time. The taste was the same, sweet, light, unreal, but something inside her shifted. The sergeant leaned against a crate, watching her expression. "We don't fight just for land," he said quietly. "We fight so people can choose what to grow." He didn't say it as propaganda, more like fact. For a moment, neither spoke. Rain hissed softly on tin roofs. Irmgard looked at the half-eaten fruit in her hand, no longer a symbol of shame, but of something she couldn't yet name. When she finally met his eyes, he nodded once. "Take the rest to your barrack. Share it. You'll see. This place isn't meant to break you." As she walked back through the camp, banana in hand, she felt something new pressing against her chest. Not defiance, not guilt. Something closer to curiosity. Tomorrow was Sunday, and rumors said the Americans allowed music in the yard. Sunday came quiet and grey, but something in the camp felt lighter. A phonograph spun near the yard gate, playing Glenn Miller's In the Mood. American guards leaned on rifles, tapping their boots. Inside the women's section, Irmgard sat on a bench peeling a banana, her third, shared among 6. The sweetness had stopped being strange. Now it was something else. Proof that captivity could still hold dignity. At noon, the gates opened between the men's and women's compounds for a cultural afternoon. Music, coffee, even a few copies of Life magazine passed around. The guards called it morale management, the prisoners called it magic. Irmgard flipped through one issue. The pages smelled of ink and salt, showing the world she'd never seen, highways, neon lights, supermarkets. One photo stopped her cold, rows of ships unloading fruit and canned goods under the headline "Feeding the Free World." She whispered, "They feed the world while ours starved." Numbers don't exaggerate. By 1945, the United States produced over 70% of the world's industrial output. To the POW, that figure was incomprehensible. Their Reich had promised order, purity, destiny, but these photographs showed abundance, speed, freedom, chaos that worked. Elsa leaned in, tapping a page that showed women workers at assembly lines. "They have uniforms too," she said. "But they smile." Across the yard, the American chaplain approached, a tall man with gentle posture and a German Bible tucked under his arm. "You ladies enjoying the music?" he asked in careful German. Some nodded shyly. Irmgard froze, unsure how to speak to a priest in enemy colors. He smiled and left them with a stack of magazines. Later, as the sun set, Irmgard watched soldiers dance to jazz. The sound drifted over the wire, horns, laughter, clinking tin cups. It wasn't triumph, it was life. Real, breathing, ordinary life. She whispered to Elsa, "Maybe this is what peace sounds like." Elsa didn't answer. She just listened, and for a moment, both forgot the war had ever existed. But when the music ended, the chaplain returned, motioning gently toward their barrack. "Tomorrow," he said, "we talk." Irmgard didn't yet know that conversation would change how she saw guilt, mercy, and herself. The chaplain arrived the next morning carrying a wooden box under his arm. He greeted the guards, stepped inside the women's barrack, and nodded politely. "Good morning, ladies." His German was hesitant but warm. The box clicked open inside, a few worn Bibles, soap bars, and folded hand towels. "For anyone who needs them," he said simply. Irmgard watched from her bunk. She wasn't sure what to make of him. The man wasn't there to preach. He just moved quietly from bed to bed, asking if anyone was ill, if anyone needed paper to write home. When he reached her, she expected a sermon. Instead, he handed her a bar of soap. "It smells like home," he said. She turned it over in her hand. It did faint lavender, faint memory. She thought of Berlin again, the ruins, the burned apartments, the women digging through rubble for wood. Reports estimate 2 million German women displaced after the war's end, forced to rebuild cities brick by brick. That smell brought them back, the life before ideology, before uniform. That night, she washed her hands with the soap, feeling the grime and weeks of bitterness run off like a confession. Elsa watched quietly and said, "Strange, isn't it? They don't want to punish us." The next day, the chaplain returned with bandages, asking for volunteers to help in the infirmary. Irmgard's hand went up before she realized it. In the camp clinic, she saw prisoners of all ranks, former SS clerks, Wehrmacht medics, even a teenage Luftwaffe helper lying on cots. Americans treated them without scorn. She helped change dressings, pass water, steady trembling hands. The work grounded her. One evening, while cleaning a wound, she whispered to herself, "We thought we were the victims." Then she paused, remembering the banana, the film reels, the soap. But maybe we never saw the world. When she returned to her bunk, the chaplain thanked her. "You're learning fast," he said. Irmgard smiled faintly. "No," she replied, "I'm remembering." As she lay awake that night, she realized that redemption doesn't arrive with flags or speeches. Sometimes it comes as quietly as soap and work. The next morning, the infirmary needed more hands. American nurses were arriving to train POW volunteers. Irmgard felt her heart beat faster. The infirmary smelled of disinfectant, coffee, and warm linen, oddly comforting scents for a prison. Irmgard tied her apron and joined the American nurses making rounds. Their white uniforms looked almost luminous against the dim barrack walls. They moved quickly, confidently, speaking in a rhythm Irmgard didn't fully understand, short, clipped English phrases mixed with soft laughter. For the first time, she wasn't being guarded, she was being trusted. Her first patient was a young German soldier, feverish and trembling. She dabbed his forehead while an American nurse named Clara adjusted the Roman foretube. "He'll be fine," Clara said. "Just needs rest." Irmgard nodded, studying her face, not suspicion, not judgment, just focus. Every gesture challenged what Irmgard had been taught. She'd been told Americans fought for greed, not compassion. But here, one enemy woman was teaching another how to tie a bandage. Over the next weeks, the work became rhythm, change dressings, boil water, chart temperatures. She learned English words like gauze, saline, and steady. Between patients, Clara showed her how the U.S. medical units worked, field triage, supply chains, even re-education efforts for POW. Records later confirmed that over 137 zero German prisoners participated in U.S. re-education and labor programs by 1947. Irmgard didn't know those numbers yet, but she felt the philosophy behind them. Fix what's broken, even if it's an enemy. One afternoon, while scrubbing instruments, she asked quietly, "Why do you help us?" Clara shrugged. "Because someone has to start over." That sentence hit harder than any speech. Days blurred into each other. Irmgard noticed small transformations. Prisoners sharing work instead of complaints. Guards exchanging jokes in mixed accents. The camp wasn't heaven, but it was becoming human. And Irmgard, the nurse who once served a collapsing Reich, found herself humming while she worked. Not German marches, but a tune Clara taught her, "You Are My Sunshine." By mid-July, rumors spread again. The supply truck from Marseille was bringing crates of fruit for the infirmary. The women laughed, guessing it was oranges, maybe apples. But when the truck finally arrived, the stenciled letters on the side made Irmgard freeze. "Bananas?" She stared at the word and smiled. Everything somehow had come full circle. The supply truck hissed to a stop, brakes squealing against gravel. Soldiers jumped down and began unloading the cargo. Wooden crates stamped bananas product of Honduras. The same yellow curve that had once symbolized shock and humiliation now drew smiles across the camp. Irmgard stood by the infirmary door, watching as the boxes were stacked. The scent faint but unmistakable, sweet, tropical, alive. Go on, Clara said, nudging her gently. You earned one. Irmgard peeled it slowly. The skin came away clean, revealing the soft fruit inside. Around her, other POW nurses watched quietly. She took the first bite, and for a heartbeat the world stilled the same taste as that first day by the fence. But it no longer felt foreign. It tasted like memory, like understanding. She passed the banana to Elsa, then to two others, the simple act transforming into a ritual, not of scarcity, but of sharing. For months these women had been prisoners, yet now, under foreign flags, they had rediscovered small human freedom. Outside, the camp loudspeaker crackled. Repatriation lists posted tomorrow morning. The announcement froze everyone. Some cheered, some wept. After years of war and months of captivity, they would finally go home. Reports confirm that most German POW women were repatriated by 1948, transported back through France and the British zones to a homeland in ruins. For Irmgard, home was no longer geography, it was whatever place allowed her to choose kindness over command. That evening, she sat on a bench watching the sun dip behind the barbed wire. The sergeant who'd once offered her the first banana passed by, tipped his cap and kept walking. She smiled, this time without fear. Elsa sat beside her, holding the last piece of fruit between her fingers. Strange, she said softly, war began with hunger and ends with this. Irmgard nodded, yes, she whispered. It ends with taste. The lights in the camp flickered on. Somewhere, a phonograph played a slow jazz tune. The women finished the banana in silence, no ceremony, no speech. Just the quiet realization that the smallest things could survive even the biggest wars. And when the last bite was gone, Irmgard brushed her hands, stood, and looked toward the gate. Tomorrow she would leave, carrying no souvenirs except the memory of sweetness after years of iron.